but almost none of it stands up to even the most basic logical and critical questions, whether it be the ridiculous formulas used to make the multi-million estimates, or the testimonies like that of Tursine, a supposed concentration camp survivor who was propped up in a major way by CNN and BBC recently, and is someone who's on the third version of her story, wildly deviating from the first, and whose passport renewal date was oddly the only thing blurred out by the CNN report, because it turns out it's a giant hole in the story that nobody's talking about. It would be odd enough if China would grant a passport to someone they're trying to genocide, but it would be even more odd that her passport was renewed during the time she said she was under arrest. So the need to blur that out becomes quite apparent now. But this obvious deceit and hole-filled narrative that doesn't remotely resemble honest journalism doesn't matter, because people are also frightened out of asking questions. I want to give you a personal example of that. My father, who doesn't necessarily agree with all of my views, of course, and is naturally concerned for the Uyghurs, as I would be too in his position receiving the information that he is, and particularly because he's a professor of social work, specializing in anti-oppressive practices, and has even written a book on the topic used by universities. He actually does empathize with my point that anytime America says they want to liberate a people's suspicion, at least in regard to the true intentions, is probably a healthy thing to have. In an academic theology form he contributes towards, he asked the question whether we should be concerned about the intentions behind the narrative and if it really is in the best interests of the Uyghur population, or it's being used to satisfy some sort of a Western imperialistic agenda. His question was, how do we support the Uyghurs and how do we help them without being used as a tool? With this mild statement in mind, my father was labeled a genocide denier. Not even in a theology form full of academics was he allowed to ask a question or to even question the intentions, even as a person who is concerned about what might be happening in Xinjiang. Now, take that one step further. Imagine someone who actually is skeptical of the whole narrative and are seeing these massive red flags. There's no room for them in society to talk about it. Consent is being manufactured, scaring people into a specific narrative. Not only did we not learn about the risks of fake weapons of mass destruction like stories being accepted by the masses, but we didn't learn from the problematic phrase used by George Bush during that time. You're either with us or you're against us. There's no room to question the narrative. You can't stand in the middle while trying to figure things out.